So the spiritual guru, the guide who speaks in a soft voice, and they dress a certain way and they act a certain way. And they can only speak about spiritual things. And the biggest indicator for that is the ultra soft voice. The ultra soft voice. We're always speaking in a spiritual tone. And that person isn't being a real person. Because I guarantee you, if you watch that person behind closed doors, away from their students, they have a completely different personality. So if you see someone who has an ultra spiritual persona, it is just that. It is a persona. That person is not rainbows and butterflies and all positive and everything is spiritual all the time. And in fact, a lot of times when someone is putting forth that persona, the more they're putting forth the positive love and light persona, the more likely it is that their shadow is very unhealed. And those are usually the people, the spiritual guides who are the most verbally abusive and nasty when they think that no one else is watching.
To a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Maya, welcome back to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor to have you. It's always fun to have you back.
It's so good to be sharing space with you again, my friend Boo Boo. I'm really looking forward to having another wonderful chat with you today.
Our conversations sometimes scare people.
Oh, really?
It's not easy topics for some people,
Yeah.
especially in the spiritual community and channelers and spiritual seekers. But I think just listening to your insights and experience helps broaden our lens and really question stuff. So I really appreciate your work and everything you do.
Yeah, these are important things that we're going to talk about. And I do tend to speak about things that are a little bit outside of people's comfort zone. But I just ask everybody to keep an open mind and stay grounded. And you don't have to believe anything just because I say it, but to consider everything, keep an open mind, and then take what resonates, and anything else, still just keep it on the shelf, because instead of throwing it out, because it might resonate later. So we're here.
Yep. I would love to talk to you about your new book, and topics from your new book, The Dark Side of Spiritual Healers, Teachers, and Lightworkers. But before we do that, maybe I'd love for you to touch briefly on your past two books and a little bit about your background. And I'd love for you to share. Maybe we'll share with that for people that ain't familiar with your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll mention my first two books and then also how it bridges into the topic that we're going to talk about today with the third book. So I'm going to give shortened titles of the first two books because they have like a title and a subtitle. And so those of you who are ready with your pen and paper, you can jot down the short title and you'll find it on Amazon. So the first book is Darkness Disguised as Light. And that's my origin story of how I was catapulted from working as a feel-good, fluffy bunny, spiritual teacher. And by the way, we need the feel-good practitioners out there because this is a difficult reality to live in. So we need you. If you're watching this and you're a feel-good practitioner, we need the work that you're doing. But that's what I was doing for a few decades until I was catapulted into a slightly different level of work, helping people with psychic protection issues, psychic attack, entity attachments, and a whole lot more. So Darkness Disguised as Light is the origin. It's the whole story of this crazy situation that I went through that brought me into the work that I'm doing today. And then the second book is the Psychic Attack Source Book. And this is the manual for exactly what is happening, all the different aspects of what's happening when you're going through either a single entity or psychic attack, or you've had a lifetime of issues. Each chapter covers different aspects of spiritual warfare types of issues. And in fact, Boo Boo, I know you're interested in this topic. There's some discussion about addiction and spiritual targeting in that book. And then the final chapter is step by step exactly what to do if you are dealing with any kind of spiritual warfare. And now let's talk about the bridge of what brought me from writing about all aspects of psychic protection to writing about abusive spiritual teachers.
Mm.
So here's what happened. I was living and working in outside of a large metropolitan area in the Midwest. And that was when I made the shift to working with psychic protection. And I had been doing that for a couple of years. And then I started to attract a different kind of client in the mix of my students and clients. I started to get people who were not only trying to escape from a psychic attack or, some difficult spiritual issue, but they were trying to escape from an abusive spiritual teacher. So this started happening more and more. And previous to that happening, I was aware that there are issues of abuse. I had seen it in my own spiritual community, but what I was aware of was the issue of sexual abuse in spiritual communities, where practitioners were stepping outside of their professional ethics and doing all sorts of things that they shouldn't be doing with their clients. I was aware of that, but there was a whole other rabbit hole that I was taken down. And honestly, I was really shocked. I had no idea that there were so many predators working. And again, not just spiritual, but I'll talk about the 3 types in today's interview. But I was so shocked. I had no idea there were so many predators hiding within the spiritual community in the area where I was living, this big metropolitan area. But then, of course, I moved to Arizona, southern Arizona. And what I quickly found was I saw the same type of predatory issues out there. And I work with people all over the world. So even when I was even before my big move cross country, I was getting clients online, different countries, all over the place who were dealing with predatory spiritual teachers, spiritual healers, etc. And so I worked with clients for a handful of years with these issues. And I eventually knew that I needed to write a book on this topic because one of the difficult issues that I would run into was that people would find me after the fact. They would find me when they were trying to get out, or after they got out when they were trying to heal from the situation. And they would say to me, I wish I had known about these things before, and maybe I wouldn't have gotten into it in the first place. Because one of the problems is that the abusive and predatory behaviors are generally supported by spiritual communities because there's a lot of dysfunction. So when the person starts to realize something maybe isn't right and they start to speak up, the rest of the community gaslights them and shames and shuns them. So they end up staying in the predatory situation until it gets really bad. And so with the book, my hope is to help people on both ends of the story, to help people to not hopefully be aware of all of these tactics and these behaviors so they won't get sucked in the first place. They will recognize it. And even if the rest of the community is gaslighting them, they will say, I know that this behavior is not healthy or this behavior is outright abusive. And then they won't get sucked in. And then I also hope to help people on the other side of the story, people who've been through it, who have never been validated because maybe their loved ones and their family never understood, and their community, that there's a big problem with gaslighting of victims in the spiritual community. And so those people are trying to heal. And if they can receive some sort of validation for what they went through, and some understanding that, oh, this is exactly the pattern that I went through. And this author, Maya, is writing about it in her book. And it just helps them to know that what they went through was real. Because when we've gone through something traumatic and no one is validating it, and we're trying to heal, and everyone's telling us, oh, that couldn't have happened, or you're just making that up, or oh, everyone else had a positive experience with that spiritual teacher. All this invalidation, it's really hard to move forward and make sense of things and heal. So I definitely felt a lot of conviction in writing this book, The Dark Side of I'll read you the whole title. It's long. The Dark Side of Spiritual Healers, Teachers, and Light Workers. And the subtitle is Abusive, Predatory, and Supernatural Behaviors Behind the Facade of Love and Light. Because some of the stuff that goes on is really dark. There's a lot of dark practitioners out there really harming people.
Can I ask you a question about going back to gaslighting? What are some examples, maybe an example of someone that's being gaslighted by their spiritual community, that individual being gaslighted? Do you have any experiences you can share with us? Example?
It's a general example, but it's the most common. So the gaslighting looks like this. A person is involved in a spiritual community. Maybe they're going through yoga teacher training. And they're working with the yoga trainer, guru, whatever the person is calling themselves. Or we could fill in the blank with any spiritual scenario. So there's, all these people who are following a shaman, and they're all working with the shaman, and they gather together in groups and they do ayahuasca or cacao ceremonies or whatever. Just like any story overlay onto there's this person who's realizing that some of their encounters with the teacher, let's call them the teacher, have felt kind of weird. Maybe there have been boundary violations. Again, we're not just talking about sexual boundary violations. It might be, there's like verbal abuse, put downs, like manipulative types of behaviors. And we'll go through the 3 different types in just a little bit. But the gaslighting factor is that, let's say the person has felt like this is abusive. I have been this experience is not good. And they try to either speak with the teacher or some of the other students. And the teacher, if it's an unethical teacher, will say, oh, so here's the gaslighting. Oh, that's just your inner shadow. You're just projecting your unhealed wounds onto me. And so they twist it. The person is trying to set a boundary and say, I noticed that you've been astral traveling into my bedroom every night. and I didn't give you consent to do that. That feels very violating. Oh, boundaries are not spiritual. If you really want to be a spiritual person, you need to stop setting these kinds of limitations. This is, and then so the teacher will put the person down and make them bad and wrong for setting that boundary. How it would look like with the other students would be, how dare you speak against our teacher, our beloved teacher? What is wrong with you? Our teacher can do no wrong. Or they might say, well, we've always had a wonderful experience with teacher so-and-so. We don't believe what you're saying. You must have, again, it always comes back to like you have an unhealed inner shadow, or your inner child is wounded, or something like that, and you're projecting that. And so there's a twisting. So the gaslighting is usually taking whatever the spiritual teachings are. The spiritual teachings are utilized as a means to twist reality, as a means to tell the person, oh, because of this teaching, we're telling you that your experience isn't valid. We're telling you that your experience didn't happen.
Interesting. I know you talk about dysfunctional spiritual teachings.
Let's talk about,
And
let's,
yeah,
let's, let's name some of them. Yeah.
please.
Okay. I'm going to glance down because I have a whole list and I don't want to forget any of them. Let's talk about them. So, yeah, I definitely want to go back and forth. I'm going to bring up a few and then, we can dive deeper. So the toxic spiritual culture, what I really believe is toxic spiritual culture. Let's go through some of these. So the ultra spiritual persona. So the spiritual guru, the guide who speaks in a soft voice, and they dress a certain way and they act a certain way. And they can only speak about spiritual things. And the biggest indicator for that is the ultra soft voice. The ultra soft voice. We're always speaking in a spiritual tone. And that person isn't being a real person. Because I guarantee you, if you watch that person behind closed doors away from their students, they have a completely different personality. So if you see someone who has an ultra spiritual persona, it is just that. It is a persona. That person is not rainbows and butterflies and all positive and everything is spiritual all the time. And in fact, a lot of times when someone is putting forth that persona, the more they're putting forth the positive love and light persona, the more likely it is that their shadow is very unhealed. And those are usually the people, the spiritual guides who are the most verbally abusive and nasty when they think that no one else is watching. So the ultra spiritual persona. And I remember, I think it was like 15 or 18 years ago, I didn't know any better. I made a video, an introduction video for my YouTube channel, and I was like, hi, I can't do it without laughing. I was like, hi, I'm Maya Zahira. I'm here to teach you about, and found that video like a few years ago and I could not stop laughing. But it's like, I was taught that if you're a spiritual teacher, you're supposed to be that. You're supposed to be like this ultra spiritual persona with a soft voice instead of being your real self.
What about Eckhart Tolle?
Oh, that's a good question. I've never met him or seen him behind closed doors, but my sense is I think he really is a soft-spoken person.
Yeah, me
And
too.
I appreciate that you brought up that point because there actually are people who are authentically soft-spoken and have a very gentle spirit. And I think, I mean, I'm speaking to the listeners now. If you really watch someone's presence online, you can really tell if this is their authentic self or their persona. if they genuinely, this is just someone, their personality is that they have just a very beautiful, gentle spirit. And I think that's the case with Eckhart. And I appreciate that you asked about that, because I'm not in any way saying that everyone who has a soft voice is going to be toxic or abusive, right?
I still am waiting to see him on TMZ flipping someone off on camera. I'm just messing around. uh, you know,
Yeah, that would be wild.
since we're in that topic, maybe how would you define an awakening or enlightenment? Because you hear these terms a lot
Uh,
in the spiritual community.
uh-huh. I think that awakening or enlightenment, I'm going to acknowledge that I think it means different things to different people. So what I say right now doesn't necessarily mean that this is what it means to everyone who's listening to this. But from my vantage point, helping a lot of people who've gotten out of abusive spiritual communities, my observation is that this idea of awakening and ascension and all of that is it tends to be very disembodied, very ungrounded, and very like spiritual bypassy, like not being present within yourself, like, oh, I'm ascending to 5D. And the person is not present in their life at all. They're ungrounded. Their eyes are spaced out. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone is. So I hope everyone knows I'm just saying that that's what I see a lot, is that the people who are talking about awakening, it's more of they are coming into a disembodied, ungrounded state where they're in floaty spiritual la la land. And that's part of this toxic spiritual culture. Whenever I hear people talking about how, oh, they've ascended to 5D, usually that person, it's like they're they've become very dissociative. They've disassociated from their actual feelings and their actual human experience. And so I do use the word awakening sometimes because I've gone through a series of awakenings and awarenesses in my life. But really, I think the ideal awakening is, maybe a better word would be integration, to
Mm,
be able to integrate all of the spiritual in a very grounded, embodied way. I was thinking today about a group of people that I was on like a council with, when it was like a class where people in the audience could ask us different questions. And I don't remember the name of the woman sitting next to me, but she started teaching about how we as humans, that this is just our meat suit, and that we are actually, our intention is to ascend, and we are spiritual beings. And all this is, I just felt so much resistance to her calling this a meat suit. Like it's just a piece of garbage. It's just a meat suit. It means nothing. But I really think that our human existence, I know this planet is hard. Like we're in this weird matrix difficult video game or whatever. But that's a whole other rabbit hole. But our human existence is sacred. And so if we're going to speak about awakening and ascension, I think, this is my personal conviction and opinion, I think that awakening, the healthiest aspect of awakening, needs to be an integration of our humanity, our physical body, energetics, spiritual awareness, connection with the spiritual realm, connection with earth, connection with Gaia, and
mm.
integration of all of it. So that's my personal belief. I respect everybody's beliefs out there, but my personal opinion is that the disembodied version of like floating out into la la land, ascending into 5D, I think is problematic and harmful. It gives people an excuse, like a high vibe, a pretend high vibe excuse to not be present to feed the homeless.
Mm. I love that. You hit it on the nail right when you finished off really well. The integration, the human and the spiritual aspect, and yeah, I think you that's perfectly said. So thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, it was a great question. And actually, I ended up touching on some of the other things on my list of toxic spiritual culture. One of the other aspects that I don't know if you've ever had this experience before, but it's what I call pep rally spirituality. Have you ever been to a spiritual event, whether it was online or in person? In person is even more powerful, where they get everybody all like everybody is like maybe chanting or oming, and everyone's like standing and going, "Yes, this is so amazing!" Like they're just having this like elated experience. But really, it's like this pep rally. Like the hosts of the event are encouraging this like excitement to where it is like it's like being at a concert, right? And that can be problematic because it takes people out of their body. It's like it literally excites your energy so much that your energy is like out here instead of like, it's great to be grounded yet uplifted. That's a great way to be present. But this like excited ecstasy to where we become unglued. I've been to a couple of events that were like that. And really, based on everything that I've seen in my client work, it's my belief that a lot of times when it's usually the big spiritual events, like the big popular, I'm not going to
Mm,
name anybody, but it's my belief that that is done on purpose with intention, because when people are in such a high state of excitement, then they also become more suggestible to mind control, to manipulation.
mm. It's interesting that you bring that up because I looked into your latest blog and you talked about spiritual events,
Yeah.
toxic and dangerous spiritual events, and one of them is psychic fairs, spiritual retreats,
Uh-huh.
Reiki
Uh-huh.
circles or healing circles, and
Mhm.
I go to an expo in Los Angeles, and it's a huge one, and you hear a lot of people say that the energy is so strong, like I felt like I don't know if I'm gonna go back because of the energy.
Yeah.
Uh, I find that interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not in any way saying that every spiritual event is bad or that I'm not even saying that like a spiritual event, a spiritual gathering where a lot of excitement is built up. That's not 100%. It's not, I'm not saying 100% that that's going to turn into a toxic environment. There's always different cases. There's always different cases. So it's not an all or nothing thing. But I would say that people need to use discernment when attending spiritual events or working with a spiritual teacher, both. I think there's a belief that if you're going to a spiritual event or working with a spiritual teacher, either way, that there's this underlying belief that it's going to be a safe space.
Mm,
People assume, oh, it's a spiritual event, so it's going to be wonderful and safe. And they might not like literally have that thought, but it's just kind of an underlying assumption. So they don't stop and do any kind of discernment process of even just asking, okay, aside from abuse or toxicity, even just sitting and being present with themselves and saying, is this event beneficial for me at this time?
mm,
Like just that, is this event beneficial for me at this time? And maybe the answer is no, it's not. It doesn't mean that the facilitator is bad or a predator, or maybe they are, but either way, you have the clarity. Okay, you know what? Maybe I don't need to go to this event. And when we're choosing our spiritual events, we're doing it with more intention and more awareness of what is right for you. And then, of course, we can be using our discernment to check, is this an event where the people putting it on are going to be cleansing the energy? Is it a safe space energetically? I literally worked at a psychic fair a couple of years ago where I walked in. I never did that fair again. I walked in and I saw a huge portal above the center of the facility space. And it was it was like a huge portal. And all these demons were coming through.
Hmm.
And I was like, did anybody clear the space? I had done that event before, but it was at a new location this time. And I've had this discussion with some of my colleagues and friends, and especially with some of my students. They've said, well, how come if this was an event filled with psychics, how come they didn't see all the demons? And I said, that's an interesting question, because I actually pulled I I pulled aside a couple of my colleagues and I said, look up there. Do you see that? There's a portal with all these demons, like hundreds of demons coming and feeding off of people. And the first thing that these very wonderful, lovely ladies who are professional psychics, what they said to me was, evil entities don't exist.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. So because if you like, I'm sure they're very gifted at giving people life advice or whatever information that they're bringing through, but if they aren't tuned into that wavelength because they believe that it's not even true, then they're not going to see it. So I decided right then and there to speak with the event facilitator. And, I spoke about some of my concerns. And anyway, very long story short, she was not very open to my suggestion that the people putting on the event needed to do major cleansing on the space and should be responsible for that. And her view was, no, the people who are coming into the event, they bring their own energy and it's their fault. It's the customer's fault. It's the reader's fault. Somebody must have brought in bad energy. And I said, no, what I'm seeing was there was satanic worship that was done a number of occasions at this hotel facility. And that portal was already there before we even came into the space. So blaming the customers. So it was kind of a lot of drama, but that's an example of how a customer, somebody who's a spiritual seeker, might be really excited. Oh, I'm going to go to this psychic fair tomorrow and I'm going to see some readers. I'm going to buy some crystals. It's going to be great. And I don't know about you, but if I think back to the old days when I was just a spiritual seeker and I was going to events, I would have never guessed that the facilitators of the event wouldn't care about a demon portal in their space and that people were being put in danger. So there's just a lot that goes on with spiritual events. There's also, without going into details, I'll just say that I've observed at a number of spiritual events the level of drama, like people who are supposed to be spiritual guides. And there's this level of competitiveness and drama and unhealed wounds. And people, the people working the events doing curses on each other across the aisle, like, well, we don't want that person to have more customers or whatever. I mean, just total nonsense, like really utter nonsense. And so actually, so after that one event that with the demon portal a couple of years ago, I think I did a small event near my home once or twice after that, but I've been taking a break because, and I want to be involved in more spiritual events in the future, but I just was having so many experiences with toxic environments, and I didn't want to send out an email to all of my local people and say, hey, come to this event. I'm going to be there. And then there's all this really unsafe energy going on. Um, I would feel like that it just doesn't feel in integrity. If I'm
Mm.
teaching people to use discernment about spiritual events, and then I'm inviting them into a space that's like blatantly unsafe. So I haven't been doing any lately, but at some point, I'm sure that I will again.
Hmm. You mentioned 3 types of abusive spiritual teachers. I'd love for you to talk
Yeah,
about that and what are the red flags in spiritual leadership.
absolutely. Okay. So let's talk about the 3 types. And so the first type is the mental and emotional abuser.
Hmm.
This is someone who is being like verbally abusive to their students or their followers. I'll go through the 3 types and then I'll give some examples. The second type is the sexual predator, working within the field of the spiritual community. And then the third type is what I call the dark healer or the dark shaman. And I think that one will be the most, I think when I start talking about that one, it's going to blow some people's minds a little bit. Cause there's stuff that like, I guess, I was pretty naive before I didn't realize that some of these things were happening, but I'll go over that third. So first, a little bit about the emotionally abusive spiritual teacher. And by the way, a lot of times there's crossover
Hmm.
between the different categories. So somebody might be a little bit of number 1 and a little bit of number 3 or what have you. So here are some qualities that you might notice in a spiritual teacher, spiritual guide, a guru, um, a spiritual healer who is a mental, emotional abuser. They might be passive aggressive or just outright aggressive, verbally abusive, verbal jabs or yelling. And here's where it gets weird because we would think, well, like in our regular everyday life, we wouldn't allow someone to yell at us. But when it's the like special chosen one, somehow we give them like, oh, they must be having a bad, or their path is extra hard, or whatever excuse that we give them. But if your spiritual healer or spiritual guide is yelling at people, that's a problem. Manipulation, gaslighting, we talked about, codependency. This one gets tricky for people. So if the healer or teacher is really focused on that they have to fix all of their followers, and they create a scenario where their followers depend on them. So let's say it's a spiritual guide who is a psychic, and they'll make it so they'll encourage the followers to not think for themselves. And the psychic guide has to give them all their answers. They have to have 3 psychic readings a week in order to like make any decisions in their life. So the spiritual guide is actually encouraging a dependency and codependency. And then and so they're intentionally creating a level of dependency. And then also they might be jealous or competitive. I actually went to a class about 18 years ago, I'm guessing, and I observed this. I actually experienced it firsthand. I was retaking some energy healing certification. I'm not going to give details, but I went to this certification course. And what I noticed was that the person putting on the course, I felt confused several times because she would do these verbal jabs at me in front of the rest of the class. And I was like, what's going on? Is she jealous or something? Because I said like, oh, I have 15 clients a week. Da, da, da. She said, 15? How do you have that many? And I thought, well, maybe she's jealous but believe me, she didn't have anything to be jealous of. She was living in a huge house and I was driving a 25-year-old car. Like, I don't know what she was jealous of. But during the lunch break, she told me that my car had leaked some drops of oil on her driveway and that I needed to move my car. And that if I were to stay at the workshop, I was required to scrub all the oil off the driveway. Okay. Now, I was humiliated. I was like scrubbing this driveway and I'm like, of course, this was years ago before I really understood how all of these abuses work. And so I'm scrubbing this driveway and I'm like wanting to burst into tears. I'm like, this is so humiliating. Why am I doing this? And why is she making me do this? And the other students were like, oh, everything's fine. It was this very like love and light sort of thing. And then I did try to speak with the instructor who was a colleague of mine later. And she was like, well, I didn't do anything wrong. What I asked you to do was totally reasonable. Anyway, I didn't ever take another workshop from her ever again. But like, I did make a mention of how horrible that was to a couple of the students. And they were like, oh, we need to do energy work on you to like make you get over this, because I was wrong for having feelings. So that's an example of this. Like the instructor or the teacher is jealous and competitive, and so they're acting that out and diminishing their students. Another red flag of the emotionally abusive spiritual teacher is if they claim to be highly evolved or awakened.
Mm.
Now, you brought up Eckhart Tolle earlier. I don't think he goes around saying, I'm awakened, I'm special. He doesn't do that. Like, we might perceive him as, oh, this is someone who had an awakening. We're perceiving that. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about someone who's putting themselves on a pedestal, And I used to run into this a lot when I lived in the Midwest. I would meet a new spiritual teacher, and they would shake my hand and they would say, I am awakened. I have been deemed awakened by the gurus of India. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. Well, why don't you come down to earth and we're going to like just have a conversation? Because I think when someone is wearing it like an award or like they're special, there's something going on there. There's some kind of control tactic. And then, of course, the emotional abuser might engage in revenge or retaliation. And again, we would think we're not going to accept that in our regular life, but you'd be amazed at how much people tolerate when it's their spiritual teacher. There's just, I don't know. It's like we make excuses for them and we decide that it's okay, or I don't know. But it's not okay. And then lack of professional boundaries. So there was one lady who I actually helped a couple people who were stuck in her web, and she had no professional boundaries at all. She was also a dark healer. So she was doing all sorts of dark magic on her clients. But one of the first red flags that I saw was that she was like buddies and friends with all of her clients. She would have them over to her house and they would all be hanging out. But then she would go up to them and say, like, I'm requiring you to have a session with me next week. And you need to pay me, and it's this weird, like, just no professional boundaries. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have a friendly rapport with your clients, but there was clearly, like, no, her students were very confused. Some of them thought that she was wanting to date, that, like, there was one person that thought, like, that they were dating, but they weren't, because, like, her way of engaging with them was so confusing. So confusing. So obviously this first category, the emotional abuser, there definitely is damage that can be done, but it really is the least damaging, the least serious out of all three.
Mm.
So now we get into the sexual predator, which is probably the one that a lot of people think of when they think of abuse in spiritual communities. They think of maybe the guru, the weird, creepy guru who's having sex with like 30 of his like students who are all like 18 years old and he's 75, and like, but that's not the only scenario that happens. I mean, it can be, not just gurus, but any type of spiritual role. It can be any age, any gender, any sexual orientation. So it's not just that scenario that I just described. So this category is the one that's the most commonly known. And I'm just going to say this, and some people might disagree because I think people do all sorts of things in the spiritual community, but I'm just going to say this. People in a helping professional role, whether it's the spiritual teacher or the massage therapist or your lawyer or your priest or your therapist, those that are in a helping profession, in a helping role, should not be having sex with the people that they are helping. And I know that the spiritual realm gets really tricky because the spiritual world is filled with all these people who are like, oh, I'm just being spiritual. And, having no boundaries means that I'm more spiritual. And this is this is an example of how people use spiritual teachings as a means of control and abuse. So I want to just give an aside here that without sharing too much, but in my personal life, I'm extremely open-minded. Like, I have friends who are polyamorous. I have like that. There's people can do what they will. I think that sexual relationships are a healthy part of being a human being. But here we're talking about when you're working with a spiritual teacher or a spiritual healer, if they are telling you that the way they can heal you is by having sex with you, then that is a red flag. Unless they are specifically advertising themselves as someone who is doing sexual spiritual healing, and even that area can be problematic because that area attracts a lot of predators, unfortunately. So it's just really hard to navigate it. But if it's like a massage therapist or your yoga instructor or whatever, if they're suggesting that your sacral chakra is blocked and the only way to unblock it is to have sex with them, then they are manipulating you. That is uh that scenario that, oh, you have such beautiful energy, you're this special being, and by the way, your sacral chakra is blocked, and the only way that can be fixed is. I have seen so many, especially young women, but not just young women. I've seen so many women be lured in by that. I've heard that exact same. It's like a script. They must share it with each other. I don't know, but it's just it's ridiculous. So that's my opinion. I know not everyone's gonna agree. We started off this interview by us acknowledging sometimes I talk about things that people don't want to hear, and that's okay. If what I'm saying gets you thinking, then that's great. That's good. The thing about sexual predators is that uh, it'll start off with increasing boundary violations. So it doesn't just start with, okay, this person is your spiritual teacher, and then all of a sudden you're having a sexual relationship. It's usually they will test the boundaries. So they will um, give you a hug that's just a little bit too long and see how you respond. Or they will touch you or stand a little bit too close, and then and it's a test to see how you respond. And if you set a boundary, then they will shame you until you back down and you allow it. And then they keep pushing and pushing the boundary until eventually they get to the point where then they're pushing into an actual sexual relationship. And sometimes the emotional and mental manipulation, the first category, there's so much mental manipulation being done on the targeted person, the grooming, all this like grooming and telling them how special they are, to where the targeted person really starts to fall in love or lust with their teacher. And the teacher is doing that on purpose. It's a whole grooming process so that then eventually the targeted person is the one who initiates. So that's what sometimes happens. That's then they're the one who initiates the sexual relationship. And so then what happens is then when that person finally escapes from that, they're beating themselves up and thinking that they caused it when actually they never they never actually gave consent. Consent under the energy of being manipulated, consent under the energy of being manipulated is not true consent. It's not true consent. So I'm just saying that for anybody who's been through this, who's like, oh, it was my fault. I said yeah, or I said yes, or I consented, or I initiated. If you really look honestly at what happened, there was probably a lot of grooming, a lot of manipulation to get you to that point. And so that was not consent. And then also the sexual predator can mix in some of the third category, which is the dark shaman. So I've known more than one sexual predator in the spiritual community who was doing black magic and attaching energy cords to their targets and sending energies, manipulating thoughts and energy in order to get the person to do what they wanted. And then that was another reason why when the targeted person, when the victim would try to get away, to try to end the professional and personal relationship, they would have a hard time doing so because there were energy cords or spells in the mix.
Wow.
Yeah. So next I'm going to talk about the dark shaman, but I've been talking and talking. So is there anything that you want to add or ask?
When they have those cords on an individual, how do you get rid of those cords?
Yeah. So generally speaking, when someone has non-beneficial energy cords, they can do a meditation and go into prayer and and visualize and intend to remove the cords themselves. However, if you're dealing with a dark healer, a dark shaman, that person is probably pretty experienced and they probably have some pretty powerful magic in the mix. So in that kind of scenario, here's where it gets tricky, because if you've been hurt by an abusive, harmful spiritual healer, it's going to be hard to trust going to another healer. But really, what I'm getting at is you probably will need some professional assistance in clearing out whatever crap that person attached to you. That is something that I do. And it is also something that I talk about in my book, The Dark Side of Spiritual Healers. There is a script for revoking consent. So this is important, an important thing to do spiritually. It's not the same as energy cords, like what you were asking about. But one of the ways that a dark healer or a dark shaman can keep getting in energetically is that verbally or emotionally or spiritually, some prior consent was given to that practitioner. Like, yes, I give you access to work with my energy or access me, or like, and it could be even like unspoken consent. Like it's just kind of an assumed consent. Whatever kind of consent was given, the person needs to revoke consent. And there's a script for that in my book. So, because again, that is how, when there's that consent cord or that consent energy still in the mix, it allows that dark shaman to still keep accessing that person over and over again, even when they have closed off any personal contact with them. The shaman might still be astral traveling to them, right? So it's tricky. So if somebody has had a run-in with a dark healer, they probably are going to need some assistance, but you can at least get started with some of the guidance in the book.
Yeah, thank you. You know what's interesting, and you got me thinking because it's kind of mind blowing that this can even happen,
Yes, it is.
is when someone could get sexually attacked through astral travel.
Hmm.
Like, how does that? I mean, to your average listener, they're like, "How is that even possible?" I mean, and how
Hmm.
do we even protect ourselves from that? I would love for you to touch on that if you don't mind.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So that is actually one of the things that's very common, that a dark healer will often use non-consensual astral travel. So they will spiritually travel to the individual without asking permission first. So that's the first violation, is you should not be astral traveling to somebody's space. It's like you wouldn't just walk into somebody's house, right? And then, of course, the even more serious violation is when that person who's astral traveling is messing with that person's sexual energy. And now this can happen when the dark healer astral travels to the person, the person physically. So the person is in their house, physical body, and then the dark healer will manipulate the person's chakras in order to stimulate sexual energy. But another way that this can happen is when the targeted person is asleep, dreaming, and they slide into astral travel where and this is really common. People will accidentally start to astral travel, and they'll be in the astral realm. So a part of them is in the astral realm while their body is sleeping. And then the dark shaman will come in and mess with the person, whether it's sexual or otherwise, will attack the person in that way as well. And I have a video that I did a couple months ago about, so if anyone wants to hear more about this, and go to my channel, Psychic Protection Sanctuary YouTube channel, and if you type in astral travel on my channel, or if you type in astral travel Maya Zahira, then you'll find my recent video where I talk about the different ways that, so it's not all about the three types of spiritual abusers, but it's specifically all about how astral travel is used as a means of psychically attacking people. And yes, absolutely, it
Mm.
is it is something that happens. And so how to protect yourself. That's so, I'll give a couple of tips, and these are going to sound really, really simple, but the more complicated tips would take a lot more time. The more complicated tips are about really developing your inner power, which takes some time and some mentoring. But I love having quick tools. Physical tools are great because you don't have to have any knowledge yet if you're totally new to this. So if someone is being attacked at night, whether it's being attacked by entities at night or someone is astral traveling and messing with you at night, whatever the violation is at night, here are some physical tools that you can use. You can put salt, any kind of salt, like table salt, cheap salt from the dollar store, put it under your pillow. And so you can actually create like a sachet, a little fabric thing that has salt in it. And you can also put you can put protective crystals in there. But salt is the biggie.
Mm.
If you're sleeping with salt, that actually helps to disengage, it disempowers that spiritual energy that's trying to mess with you. And I'm just going to say, I know this is weird, but anybody who's desperate and you're being really attacked at night, when I was going through my major spiritual boot camp training of psychic attack in 2016, that catapulted me into this work, I was dealing with a nasty entity. And I literally poured salt all onto my fitted sheet. And I was like sleeping on it and it was sticking to me. That's going to be uncomfortable. But another thing that you could do is pour salt. Like if you're dealing with major attack, pour salt underneath your fitted sheet, then put your fitted sheet on top of that. You're still going to feel the grains, but you're going to have more protection. You're going to have salt under your whole body. But for those who aren't really dealing with anything too serious, if you don't want the mess, you can create a little fabric bag. I don't think plastic is good. It tends to block the helpfulness of the salt. So find some fabric and make a sachet, put that under your pillow. And the other thing that I'll add to safety while you're sleeping is to choose for yourself a protective amulet. So this is an object or a pendant that has a lot of protection for you. Now, one thing to consider is what religion or spiritual practice you currently practice or that you practiced while you were growing up. So for me, I was raised Catholic. I stopped being Catholic decades ago, but I still feel a very strong resonance with the Catholic rosary. And so I
Mm.
always have a rosary under my pillow because since I have a connection to it, because I have a connection to it, that is why it offers more protective qualities for me. So for everybody watching this, rosary might be good for you, might not be. You might come from a different religious tradition that you currently or used to practice, and maybe a symbol from that is going to offer you power. Okay. So those are some ideas. Again, whether you're dealing with psychic attack, non-beneficial energies, entities messing with you at night, or a living person astral traveling to you at night.
You know, I was going to ask you something. It came to my mind right now. How do you define demons and where do they come from? Is there a connection with extraterrestrials?
Oh, rabbit hole. Yes. Okay. So I'll preface my answer by saying this. The things that I teach are based on firsthand knowledge. So you'll notice that I don't ever quote rarely will I quote any holy books. So I'm not going to be saying, well, demons are from this place because this holy book says so. And our holy books, our sacred scriptures that we have in humanity have a lot of importance. But the things that I say that I know are because I've had firsthand encounters. So I'm going to tell you what my experience with demons is, what they are, what I see them as. But before that, I'm going to say I am still figuring out exactly where they come from. Yes, I know that I know all the stories of like there was a battle in heaven and da 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 da. And I'm not saying that that didn't happen, but as of yet, I have seen no evidence in my encounters, firsthand encounters with demons, which I've had many. I have never seen any evidence or information that of that story being accurate. I'm not saying that it's not true, but as of yet, I have not been shown any information that tells me this is exactly why they were created or where they came from. What I can tell you is that I know that they do have their own realm, that the lower realms of the afterlife, as a psychic and a clairvoyant and a seer, I can see. It's interesting to have this brain that I have because I'm intuitive, but also linear. So I have the analytical and the intuitive. And so I'm able to see this like construct of the afterlife. There's all the upper levels of the afterlife, and then there's the lower realms. And depending on where someone is vibrationally when they pass, that's where they're going to go. And it's literally about frequency. It's very natural. It's not like you're being punished. You go here. It's like people will just naturally, souls will naturally, or beings, demons, they naturally go where there's a frequency match. So when I look at the lower realms, further down we go, it is demons, 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 demons. They're hanging out in the demonic or in the lower frequency realms of the afterlife. We don't have any high vibration beings down there. It's all demons. And then as we go up a bit, then we have a lot of human, very troubled human souls in that mix as well. So that's not where they come from, but that is where they are. I see a lot of them there. That's a realm that they hang out in. And then, of course, they spend a lot of time hanging out close to the physical realm because they love to mess with humans. And you also asked, what are demons? And I'll give you a quick definition, but I'm in the middle of, or I just finished chapter 1 of my newest book that's all about false light entities. And chapter 1 clearly defines each of the different kinds of entities that are able to shapeshift and pretend to be beings of light. And demons are one of the kinds of beings that do tend to shapeshift and pretend to be benevolent beings. But in that chapter, what I described, and I'll try to be brief because I could go on and on for an hour about the types of demons. But what I have seen and experienced firsthand is that there's a hierarchy of demons. So the lowest in the hierarchy of demons are more like creature-like beings, and they are lower intelligence beings, and they tend to operate mostly by instinct rather than by intellect. So a lot of times I will see them appear as like gargoyle types of beings, but sometimes other shapes, other creatures as well. And then the mid-range demons tend to look more like humans, but more like actually more like the Hollywood version of demons, where it's like a standing person. So instead of a creature, it's a standing upright human, arms and legs, head, torso, all that. But they have gray skin, or skin color that looks off, that's not regular, the range of our beautiful range of human skin tones. So the demon, all the demons that I see, they usually will have horns, which is really weird. I've actually seen demons who have little stubby horns, and then some that have ram's horns, and everything in between. So there's different kinds of horns. I haven't seen any tails, but that doesn't mean that they don't have them. Maybe I just haven't looked. But what else about the mid-range demons are more intelligent than the lower level ones. These are the ones that I see the most of these. They are hanging out with all the living people, trying to get people to live a life of suffering. They are attached to a person, or even they will step in and possess a person, but it's usually not so obvious. It's not like the horror movies with the head spinning and the levitation. But then we get to the high ranking demons, and the high ranking demons are, they are less common on Earth, but I have actually run into a few of them. And when I have experienced them, they've presented as either a blackest of black energy, or a human, like a very attractive human man or woman. So no longer the stubby horns and that sort of thing, but like a very handsome, sleek man. And so they've presented themselves in either of those ways, and they are extremely intelligent and they're intelligent and psychopathic. And I actually encountered one of these high-ranking demons at a Catholic conference.
Wow.
Where they were doing doing prayers, and they were doing Eucharistic adoration. Some people know what that is. It's where they take the blood and body of Christ, the bread and wine, they put it on the altar, and the congregation worships that. And I'm not going to go into the whole story because I'm going to tell it in my upcoming book. And I don't think I would do it justice just sharing it briefly. But there was an entity that stepped in. It was a high-ranking demon, and it was feeding off of the energy. So this blew my mind. The person running the event called everyone up, please come and kneel at the altar and worship Jesus, which sounds amazing, right? Like, this is a beautiful experience. I didn't get up. I stayed in the back and I watched everyone go forward. And as a clairvoyant, I saw all of this golden energy rising from the group of people. It was this worship energy. And there was this blackest black energy entity, high-ranking demon that was
Wow.
actually standing in front of the monstrance. It was standing in front of the bread and wine, and it was absorbing all of this energy. I did. I used to have a connection with my local priest here in my small town, different parish than where I experienced this. And I set up a meeting with him and I told him about what I saw. And guess what? Do you think he believed me or not believed me?
He believed you.
He did not believe me.
Oh no.
No.
Wow.
And I thought that he would, because he does believe in spiritual warfare. Some priests don't really, believe it or not, there are priests who don't believe in that, and then some do. I wasn't sure if he would be open to it, but he did tell me about how he did house clearings and he saw stuff fly across the room. But when I told him about this, actually, maybe he did believe me, but he got very uncomfortable when I told him this story, and he started quoting Bible verses to me. And I think what I described to him was beyond what he could believe in that moment, because it was almost beyond what I could believe too, because previously I had a belief that like that sort of thing would not be allowed, like Jesus or God would not allow that, right? Like this sacred sacrament. Absolutely, like Satan would be kicked off that altar, right? Like, or the demon, like that's I think that the priest saw it as literally impossible. He started quoting Bible verses, and he said, well, the Bible says this, this, and this, and then therefore that entity could not have been standing in front of the bread and wine. And I said, no, it was. And he was like, oh. uh, so, but here's the thing is I knew that I just felt a strong conviction that I was supposed to tell him about this, that he might not really believe me at first, but that it would click later. I still feel like later on down the road, he's going to have some other encounter, and he's going to start to realize that there's something going on. And anyway, that's a very perhaps very unsettling story. I think so. Just to settle that energy a little bit, I would say that unfortunately, what I'm realizing when it comes to the spiritual realm and when it comes to false light and all of that, that I think we make assumptions that certain areas are off limits to the dark. The certain areas are like safe spaces. Just like before when I was talking about spiritual events, and that people make an assumption that, oh, it's a spiritual event, it's a new age conference, it's going to be a beautiful event, safe energy, uh, a- and um, and it's not, and maybe it's not a safe space. But I don't know about you, but having been raised Catholic, there was still some deep belief within me that was like, oh, well, like something demonic would not be allowed. Like this could not
Yeah.
happen. This is impossible. And I think we need to realize that darkness can get in anywhere. I mean, without going totally down this rabbit hole, I'm just going to quickly mention, of course, darkness can get into mainstream churches. Look at all of the abuse
Yeah.
that has happened. That's darkness. That's people's inner darkness that they're acting out on their victims. And I truly believe there's demonic influence in that mix as well. So of course there's evil. Um, and so whether it's a new age event or a church event, I think we need to use discernment, because those dark energies can really get in anywhere.
Well, it's funny you bring that stuff up because, and people you don't have to agree with me, but I just
Mhm.
have this strong feeling that Yahweh is a false light. And you hear
I
some of these
do. I
scriptures,
agree with you. I do. I
and you hear
agree.
some of the scriptures like, holy crap, there's no way the God Almighty or whatever
Yeah.
would say stuff like that if God is love, right?
Yes.
Whoa, this doesn't make sense. Sounds like a
Yeah.
big ego.
Yeah. I think we're on the same wavelength with that. So just to clarify, I do believe in a divine presence, or an energy, creative energy that flows through all things, an energy that is sacred. I might be considered an animist because I believe that there is consciousness in everything, the tree, the rock, and I believe that everything holds that sacred energy. And so that could be thought of as God.
Yeah.
So for me, in my mind doesn't say, I don't believe in God. My mind says, I don't support that God, the one
Yeah.
in the Old Testament who commits genocide. And like literally, if you look, and I know I'm going to offend some people, but like if you really look at the Old Testament in a new light, as like if you've been indoctrinated, I was too, I was raised with it. But if you were to step away and just see it with fresh eyes, you would see that this behavior that this God, Yahweh, is engaging in is psychopathic.
Yeah.
Literally, like, if you make him mad, he's going to like wipe out the entire earth except for Noah and his ark. That's one story. But there are stories, of let's explode a whole area of the planet because those are bad people. Like, is that really a loving God? So that the Yahweh of the Old Testament, yeah, I don't align with that, but I'm also very respectful of what people believe. I actually have attended the local Episcopal church here. Very sweet group of people who believe in social justice and feeding the hungry and helping people who are struggling. And so I don't throw all of it out, and
Yeah.
I kind of like coexist with people who have a lot of who have different beliefs. But I agree with you. I don't think that Yahweh is a good entity.
And I think the Gnostics try to warn us about that, but then the church try to burn all the Gnostic texts that weren't put
Yeah.
in the Bible. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I just have a strong intuition on that.
yeah. Well, and speaking of that, um, and I'm not trying to plug a book, but I'm just really excited about my current book that I'm reading that's about false light. And I'll give the title at some other time. But Um, literally in that book, I talk about the story about going to the Catholic conference and seeing that high-ranking demon. But I also share another story about how I went to a Christian church and so the book actually starts with a story about how I'm in a Christian church and something hits me hard on the head, right on the temple. And I was like, ow, like what hit me? And I looked up. I don't know if I've told you this story before,
No.
but I looked up and I saw a Jinn, the biggest Jinn I have ever seen. And we don't have time to go into the whole definition, but I've had a lot of encounters with Jinn, and they are made of plasma. It's like this fire, electricity kind of energy. And that was what I was attacked by, a Jinn, a different Jinn in
Wow.
2016. And that switched on my ability to see them. And so here I am a while later, I forget, a couple of years later, I'm at this Christian church and this thing hits me on the head. And it was the biggest Jinn I have ever seen. It was as big as the entire congregation. And this was a mid-sized church. And it was floating above the congregation. And when I looked up at it, so I could see it I could see it psychically. It was like I could clearly see it. And then when I looked up at it, I had the psychic claircognizant knowing that this being has been pretending to be God at that location
Wow.
and is checking in on his worshipers. Jinn love to be worshipped. So I have stories in my book, my new coming book, about how false light entities, including Jinn, they are one type of false light shapeshifters, how they not only show up in the New Age through false channeling of false entities, but my mind is being blown recently because I'm having more situations where I'm seeing false light showing up in Christian churches and beings pretending. I think I could have believed, with what I knew about false light, I could have believed that a Jinn or another false light entity would pretend to be an angel, because I've seen that a lot. But my mind was blown when I saw one pretending to be God. And the first thing that went through my mind is like, how is that allowed? How is that allowed? So that might bring us to the whole near-death experience, afterlife. I think you were going to ask me about that. You want to ask me about
Yeah, yeah. What's your take on near-death experiencers when they talk about going to the other side and seeing the light and all that?
and seeing different beings?
Yeah,
Yeah,
different beings, ETs, all different types of beings.
yeah. So we chatted about this really briefly before we started recording, and I said, "Oh, let's talk about this during the interview." Um, I'm going to say that actually, and I just wanted to say this for everybody to hear. This is an area that I am currently seeking
Mm.
direct knowledge, because again, I can hear people's stories of like, I've actually been researching and reading more books. I've been reading about near death experiences since I was 14. Found the book Life After Life by Raymond Moody in
Mm.
my school library. And so I've been interested in this topic. I personally have never had a near death experience, which, like, I'm lucky. Yes, let's not die yet. But I also have found it frustrating, because all of my research that I do is very forensic. It's based on firsthand experience, or my firsthand experience of helping a client with something. And so I personally haven't had a near death experience, but I have been deep in pondering about things that I hear about in these near death experience stories. The stories, while they sound very inspiring, like, wow, that sounds amazing and uplifting and everything, but based on all these experiences that I've had with false light and false light entities pretending to be angels, that I've had firsthand experience in this lifetime, firsthand experience with entities pretending to be Jesus, God, all sorts of beings, aliens. I've actually seen that too, false light versions. And so why wouldn't that also show up in the near death experiences as well? And some of the stories that people tell, I'm like, the way they're describing it, that doesn't sound authentic. Those descriptions fit what I would describe as a false light entity experience. So I'm literally in the like questioning mode, where I don't have like a definite, this is the answer. It is absolutely this. But hopefully in this lifetime, I will get to that point and be able to have definitive answers. But I will say this, that the stories that people share are pretty questionable. I think that people believe, whether they've had the experience or they're watching a YouTube video of an experiencer, it's like the assumption is to believe it because it's beautiful. Oh, here's one thing, is one sign that you're dealing with a negative entity attachment in this lifetime. This is something that I teach. If you're going along in your life and you are filled with euphoria and bliss, that is a sign that there is a negative entity attaching to you. It is a common tactic that negative entities use. And the negative entity might be hiding itself, or it might be showing up as a false light entity, pretending to be a ascended being, and you're filled with bliss. And so when people are having near-death experiences and they're describing it on their YouTube video, and they're talking about being filled with this bliss, to me, that sounds exactly like the phenomenon that I teach about, this spiritual anesthetic.
Hmm.
And it was a former mentor of mine who introduced me to that idea of spiritual anesthetic. And so there's just so many things that are suspect in these stories.
But what about if someone that comes back fully transformed from their near death experience? Like they're just a whole different person and they're more loving, they're more compassionate. What's your
Mhm.
take on that? I mean, obviously, not all NDEs are going to have those negative or false light entities, right? Do you think there's some genuine ones? What's your take on that?
I don't know. I don't
Mm,
know yet if there
yeah.
are some that are genuine, if there are some near-death experiences that are genuine. But I can say that if we're comparing it to um, physical life entity experiences, that as a physical living person, we can have an experience with an authentic benevolent spiritual being, let's say Buddha or Kuan Yin or something like that, that there's an authentic experience that can be had. And there are also plenty of negative beings that will pretend to
To be.
be
Yeah.
Buddha, Kuan Yin, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, da 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 da. And so there's the real experience, and then there's the false version of it. So if we were to take that idea that like what's happening here might be a reflection of what's happening over there as well, my uh, logical spiritual nerd brain would say that it's probably likely that there are authentic beings over there and there are tricksters as well.
Mm,
Now, I would also say that if someone has been transformed in a positive way from their near death experience, I think that's a good thing. Like I think we can celebrate that they've had a positive transformation. I also think that if they've had a positive transformation, that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't encounter false light on the other side. I've seen plenty of people in this life who have had encounters with false light teachings, false light entities, and from an untrained eye observing that, we might think, oh, they're living this wonderful life. They've transformed their life. Um, and, but the source of it wasn't authentic. Like the true spiritual source wasn't authentic. So what I'm saying is if someone has had a positive transformation from an NDE, I don't think that equals authentic experience in the afterlife. I don't think one equals the other. A person could have encountered some tricksters and not know it and still have had a healing experience from it. Yeah, does that make sense?
yeah, makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. Um, what about you hear a lot about light language, or in church you hear about people speaking in
Speaking in
tongues.
tongues.
Um, can that be genuine, like spirituality, or can
Mhm,
that be false light as well?
mhm. Yeah, I can give a definite answer on this. I have a definite answer, thank goodness. Um, so speaking light language or singing light language or speaking in tongues, those are different ways of expressing s- um, of of a spiritual expression, just different tradition. You know, one is more spiritual, one is more in the religious context, but it's really kind of the same thing, right? Just a different context. And so There are some experiences of that, some people that are bringing forth an energy that's very pure and authentic. And there's some that are bringing forth energies that are coming from a false light source. And then there's a middle category. There's another category. There are people who the light language or speaking in tongues is really just gibberish, and it's coming from the person's ego or imagination. And that's not to say that I'm not saying that all light language is gibberish, because there is authentic, there is an authentic, I don't like to use the word channeling because it's usually false light, but there is an authentic, moving through of energy. Like someone can be moving earth energy or ancient earth energy through their body, and it's coming out through an authentic, beautiful language or a song. And I've listened to some musicians who have the most beautiful chants that they sing. It's like amazing and mesmerizing to listen to them. And um, I mean, I haven't psychically evaluated each one, but I will say that if I have a strong, I have a strong false light spidey sense. So if something immediately feels like false light, I don't want to be exposing myself to those frequencies, and so I'll turn it off.
Mm.
Like with blessings, I don't want to listen to that. Um, but yeah, so I think it could be any of those because life is complicated. I think I'll just say this because I can tell you have another question. I think that as human, it's great. It's a great conversation. I think it's human nature, and this is not about you. This is about other people that I've encountered. It's human nature to want to oversimplify things. For example, there are people out there who are teaching and they genuinely believe that all spiritual entities are false light. There are no genuine spiritual beings. All of it is a trick. And I respect that people have that view, but I think it's a reflection of like human nature that it's like all this thing or it's all that thing. So when it comes to light language, uh, I'm not going to say that it's all false light or it's all authentic because I think our reality is more complex than that. We have things that are authentic, and we also have a lot of fraudsters in the mix as well.
Yeah, and that must be a challenge for you. Probably in the beginning of your journey when you're dealing with all these different beings, these
Uh-huh.
false light entities,
Yeah.
where must be challenging for you where you got to question your perception where it's probably easy to fall into the trap where everything's false light. I
You
can
know,
only imagine being in that.
I never fell into that.
Oh no! Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I just
didn't.
I just see
Yeah.
it could happen to anybody. So I was wondering if that was like a period
Yeah.
of like a challenge for you in the
Yeah, that's a
beginning
good
of your
question.
journey.
Yeah, I actually, I mean, I can understand how if someone had an encounter with a false light entity, that they would then, their brain would just want to make the assumption that like it's
Yeah.
everything is that, it's all that. Um, and I wonder why. I think it could be just a combination of how my brain works with this like analysis and intuition.
Mm.
And then also the fact that I've always been very clairvoyant and have all the clairs and just like a combination of all of that, how my brain thinks that as soon as I had that first, I'm going to use the word awakening, that first awakening in 2016 to false light, where I was attacked by that false light entity. And that awakened the ability, or reawakened maybe the ability, it opened up the ability to discern false light, to be able to discern false light from authentic, false from authentic. So that that is really my biggest and
Yeah.
strongest skill at this time. And you talked about how it must have been frustrating. What has been frustrating for me, and I'm just going to be honest here, what has been frustrating for me is that um, I can easily see, like, oh, that's a false light entity. And when I would try to tell someone, point it out to them, they like people just wouldn't believe it. They just would be like, "Oh, no, no, no," like, or they couldn't discern what I was discerning. And to me, it's like, it's so obvious. Why can't you see it? And and that's why I actually waited to write the book that I'm writing now about false light, because I kept feeling like I'm just shouting into an empty abyss. Like I'm talking about false light. And I'm like, hello, 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 hello. Is anyone listening? And it would just echo into the abyss. And like I have students who work with me and they very much understand false light, but most of my colleagues who I love dearly, but they just they don't they don't have the discernment about false light yet. So recently or a couple of months ago, I guess now at this point, I had a very jarring experience. I had been taking 6 or 9 months off from writing, several months, since I wrote The Dark Side of Spiritual Healers. And I was thinking, well, I'm just going to wait until spiritually, intuitively, it feels like the right time. I'm just going to wait. And I don't know which book I'm going to write next. And then I was just focusing on other things and focusing on health. And then I had this experience a couple of months ago where a client came to me and I'm going to be vague. I don't want to share personal details, but
Yeah.
this client contacted me online. I worked with this person once. I knew them from before. And I will say that they were dealing with a Jinn attachment. And at this point, the Jinn had completely possessed the person, which I
Wow.
don't normally see that. Normally the Jinn is in the person's field interacting with them, but this Jinn had fully integrated and would move the person's body and would project thoughts into the person's mind. And I was like, okay, well, we worked together before. I'm going to try to work with you. And I really genuinely intended to work with this person. And then we had a session. And right after the session, I heard clairaudiently right here, I will kill you. And I'm like, oh, that's the entity. But I know from experience, a lot of entities, they will play mind games and they want you to believe that they're powerful or that they're going to do something bad when they really aren't going to, and it's just a power play. And I went, okay, I hear that, but so I noticed that. I'm going to take note, but I'm not um I'm not going to make any decisions, right?
Mhm.
Well, then I went to bed. And just for good measure, I was doing some extra protection that night because I knew about that entity. And I had an audible version of the Quran playing, which is a protection against jinn, typically. And I had that playing and on my phone. And then in the middle of the night, I woke up because I suddenly woke up because I was aware that my phone had suddenly shut off. And I was like, oh, well, I need to turn that back on. So I have that playing while I'm sleeping. And as soon as I went and touched my phone, I was put into such a state of extreme vertigo. Room was spinning. And I felt the presence of this entity, and it was like, don't work with so and so. And I was like, okay, obviously, if I literally cannot function, like, and I can't show up for the rest of my clients, this is a no-brainer. Like, if this entity is going to make life so miserable, I can't even stand. Like, if you've ever had vertigo before, where it's spinning, everything is spinning so bad, you can't get up, you can't do anything. It's extreme.
Wow.
And so anyway, I'll leave out the rest of the details, but I did make a decision that, like, well, I owe it to the rest of my clients that I'm already working with to keep them safe from this. This is not something I'm going to take on at this time. But that next day, I sat up in bed and I was like, I really need to write this book on false light. Like, obviously, someone else, I trust someone else is going to help that client. There are other people who do spirit releasement and that sort of thing. There are other people I trust that they will find what they need. But this issue didn't have to go that far, where the person welcomed it back in. Like, I need to, these stories, obviously I'm not going to share details of clients, but the stories, the things that I've seen, including the story in the church, and like just all the times that I've tried to explain false light to people and they don't listen, and then they get sucked in, and then are completely possessed by, and that's an extreme case, by the way. Usually it
Yeah.
just hangs out and plays with the person. But it doesn't need to get that far. And so that was one of a string of events regarding false light trickster entities where I was like, okay, I have to write this next book. So we've talked about some really intense things here today. All right. So everybody who's watched this, take good care of yourself. We've talked about things that needed to be talked about. But if you
Yeah.
need to go, like if you need to, like anyone watching this, if you're feeling a little bit weird, the best thing to do is to ground. Get your bare feet or your butt on the earth. And that's going to help you integrate whatever from this interview is right for you and
Yeah.
discharge whatever is not. And get it simple tip. Go get a drink of water, everybody. Go get a drink of water. And that's going to help cleanse. Because gosh, boo boo, we really went far in this one, didn't we? Oh my gosh.
Can I ask you one more quick question?
Of course. Yeah.
Can false light entities be highly intelligent? And the reason why I'm asking that, because you hear people talk about, I channeled Jesus or I channeled this,
Yes.
these highly evolved beings,
Yes.
supposedly, right? And I always judge, like, my friend the alchemist. I think she's my favorite, like, spiritual teacher out there, and I think
Yeah.
she's like the real deal and has a lot of deep insight and stuff. So I always compare. Okay, they're gonna channel Jesus or the Buddha or whatever. Let me see how deep are they. And then you hear
Right.
the like the channeling is like, oh, okay, I could have said that.
Right.
uh,
It,
yeah,
it always starts with, dear ones, we are with you. Do not fear. Right.
yeah.
Every single channeling starts with that. So I'll answer your question. Yeah. So can false light entities be highly intelligent? And one reason why you're asking the question, it's what I'm hearing is you want to know, as you are discerning channeled messages, you can rule out if it's just like a very basic, dull message. It's either from a false light entity or it's just from that person's consciousness. And maybe they mean well, maybe they don't, but it's not really a true channeled message. So does an intelligent message indicate that it is authentic? That is the real question. If it is a a very deep and intelligent channeling, does that mean that it is coming from an authentic being? And I'm going to tell you, boo-boo, I'm going to tell you the truth, that certain false light entities are extremely intelligent, especially Jinn. Jinn are just exceedingly intelligent. And let's say if there is a channeling that's coming through just some like troubled spirit, like a troubled ghost, that one is not going to come through as like a deeply intelligent, deep channeling. But if it's coming from a Jinn, then it's going to be very intelligent. It's going to be very in depth. Now, does that mean that there are no authentic channelings? I'm not saying that. So there can be authentic messages channeled through authentic beings of light. There are other indicators if it is false light or not. And you would probably need to ask the person doing the channeling questions like, how is the message coming through to you? If it's a very like embodied experience of like the person is very grounded and the message is coming through in a very grounded way, they're writing it or speaking it, and it's very embodied, then that could be a sign. It could be authentic, or it could just be coming through that person's own embodied wisdom. If the person says that they are hearing an entity, a loud voice in their head, that is a Jinn. If they're hearing a loud voice speaking clearly to them, and this happens a lot. I've had a lot of people over the years who've said, "Oh, I have a spirit guide that tells me things," and they would describe it, and they would say, "Yeah, it told me to do this and that, and then I ended up in prison because I followed its advice." I think things like that. But Jinn, I've had firsthand experiences with Jinn, and I know how they communicate. And so if it's like a very bright vision, like bright light or loud booming voice, Jinn tend to go over the top. They're overcompensating for the fact that they are not authentic light. But if it is a true message, it is usually coming in a more subtle way. So if you question the channeler and you say, well, how is it coming through? And they say, well, I feel the messages and then I put it into language. Like that could be a sign that it might be authentic. But if they're saying, oh, yeah, I had this vision of this bright light, and then I started hearing this voice, that's exactly a definition of a Jinn. So it's very, all of the false light entities is very tricky. And I recognize that. So even though earlier I said I would feel frustrated because people wouldn't be able to see it, but I also know from firsthand experience, that many of these entities are very convincing, very, very convincing, which is why I'm going to be sharing all my stories in this upcoming book. And that's the only way I can express the information of like, this is how I know this. And if they read the stories, maybe they'll be able to, like for you, you're wanting to genuinely discern like which channelings can I trust? My hope would be that a genuine spiritual seeker like yourself would be able to take a book like I'm in the middle of writing and to integrate that, to be able to utilize with your own discernment even more. Because it sounds like you're still trying to figure out how to discern, which I get. It's hard because I mean it, they are very, they are just exceedingly tricky and very convincing.
Well, I think I have a pretty good bullshit filter. Excuse my
Good.
language.
So
No.
that is serving you. That is serving you. So
Yeah.
so that's something that everybody could develop more, right? Without
Yeah.
even reading the book. Just like develop that bullshit
Filter.
detector even more, and let's take this like oh, I want to get an inspiring message, and so we automatically trust. Let's take that automatic trust and move it over here and use the bullshit detector. Hmm.
Thank
Yeah,
you for coming on. Yeah,
this was
I
great.
yeah, appreciate it. You know, my last on my awakening, when I had an awakening, I'm using that word because I had
Yeah,
a shift in
totally fine.
consciousness that day. And my friend Carlo, who was in prison, a couple years later, he wrote me, or no, he called me actually, and he told me about the night that I had my awakening, where I shifted into a different person. And he said he was with me that night, but I blacked out. I was a blackout drinker. I didn't even know what was going on. But he heard me in a room and he heard screaming. And he said it sounded like something like in the Exorcist movie.
Mhm.
And he was so scared that he didn't want to bother me. He just left me alone in that room. Whatever was going on was going on.
Mhm.
Um, but he said it sounded like I was fighting with demons.
Mhm.
And but that day, that right after that, I woke up a different person. I was like in a whole different state of consciousness, and I'm the person. I mean, I've since then I this is me now. You know, I just like I feel like maybe I might have lost entity attachments or something. Stuff that was really causing me to be stuck in drinking and living in a really negative state. Like it was all washed away. If that makes any
Mhm.
sense.
Do-
Um,
I
can
so
that be
I'm gonna
possible?
ask you a question based on the intuitive sense that I'm getting.
Okay.
Do you ever feel like a genuine, benevolent presence of some kind came in and saved you from those demons?
I can't really say anything like that because
Okay.
I just woke up a different person.
Yeah.
Like I had a shift in consciousness where like I knew deep down within my heart, the core of my being,
Mhm.
the way I was no longer I was no longer gonna live that way, be that way. As a matter of fact, I was already in a whole different state of consciousness. I was just a changed person.
Mhm.
It's like I had a shift in consciousness. So I can't say anything. I was blacked out. I do
Yeah.
remember having well, I like to call it a nirvana experience where like I had like that magic candle be blown out of the five senses and all my labeling and my identities and all that. And I
Mhm.
was in a state of pure consciousness. And then all of a sudden, I mean, that thing that I blew out turned back on, that sense of self identity. And then but I was a different person where I was no longer identified with all the labeling that I grew up with and the conditioning. A lot of that stuff was gone, and I was a different person, and I've been a different person ever since that moment. But I can't say it was any type of being or anything else like that. I just had a shift in consciousness
Mhm.
through a
Yeah.
lot of pain. So
Yeah.
yeah, but he said he
Yeah.
heard demons fighting. I was fighting with demons or something. So
Mhm.
I just thought that was
Yeah,
interesting.
I
I always
believe
wanted to
that.
ask you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, Maya. I really love talking
Yeah.
to you, and I'm sure you piss off a lot of channelers and other people in the
Yeah.
spiritual community. But
Well,
I really,
I just want to say to the channelers, I am genuinely sorry for pissing you off. I don't mean any ill will. I'm not trying to speak ill against anyone. But my one hope is that people will just simply consider, just consider some of the things that I've said. And if it doesn't resonate, that is okay. That's okay. You can leave it. But yeah, I'm hoping to spread some truth. These are some things that I'm seeing, and I'm hoping that more people will wake up to some of these things, especially about false light.
thank you. I love and appreciate that about you. So I really appreciate you
Mhm.
coming on and look
Thank you
forward
for
to the future.
having me. Can I give my website real quick?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, so website Psychic Protection Sanctuary redefining.com. And if you sign up for the email newsletter, then you do get a series of free resources and free gifts. So you get some goodies. The first thing that comes is a quiz to determine if you are currently under psychic attack. And even if you're not having those kinds of issues, it might be interesting to look at the list in case you end up having that kind of issue in the future. And then the second free gift is a free guided energy balancing session. And that's really powerful and it's free. So, and then YouTube channel, Psychic Protection Sanctuary YouTube channel. And there are a lot of videos on there. So come on over to the channel and subscribe.
Thank you. And I'll put that in our episode when I upload the
Great.
video. I'll put the links. So if anybody's listening, I'll have them in the links as well. So thanks again. And namastizzle.
Thank you.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a break. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on a day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding.